The heart of any home should be its backyard, which should be the sole place you can rely on for both comfort and security. However, not all homes are created equal, and many do not adhere to stringent safety standards. The earliest permanent constructions of humans were cave dwellings and mud huts, until modern construction methods became widespread. However, architects will rarely build houses in hazardous locations, defying the intended purpose of homes. Japanese tea houses to German castles. Many houses are perched on dangerous perches. Of course, it is difficult to quantify, but today we are looking at the top 10 most dangerous home locations based on public perception. But before we start, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for more updates. Number 10. Habitat 67. Moshe Safdie, a young Israeli-Canadian architect, designed the Habitat 67. During the 1960s, much of the Western world was looking toward the future during the race for space. Thus, Safdie was certain that most of our homes would be constructed in a similar manner to Habitat 67. Fortunately for us, he was incorrect, and the only thing scarier than living in one of these apartments is standing beneath them, because these buildings resemble a massive toddler dropped their blocks, and someone decided to put windows and doors on them. Habitat 67 is 12 stories tall and comprises 354 prefabricated concrete units that are arrayed in various crazy and fantastic combinations as well as different sizes, all of which appear to be suspended in midair. On the bright side, each unit has at least one private terrace, and despite the frantic design, every apartment is entirely isolated, so there must be a method to the madness. After all, it is just that sometimes you have to peel back the many hazardous layers in order to discover the good notion. Safdie was born here as a result of this project. He went on to create about 80 more structures throughout the world. The chances of anyone designing something like Habitat 67 again are extremely slim. Number 9. Cliff House, San Francisco. The Cliff House, which has been a top eating spot since 1860, is located on this cliff above the Pacific Ocean, and since then it has been a restaurant that residents of San Francisco have visited. 3 generations of San Franciscans and numerous tourists have dined at the Cliff House and appreciated the stunning ocean views. There have been a lot of cliff dwellings over the years, with the design changing with the times. It burned down twice and was closed during Prohibition, but the Cliff House is still there to welcome new guests every day, perched on Point Lobos at the mouth of San Francisco Bay. This was a popular location for shipwrecks before radar. Strong currents, rocks, and dense fog made for a deadly combination, especially at night when the SS Ohioan, a cargo ship that had run aground near the Cliff House on a dark night in 1936. The enormous property of the Cliff House, which includes a ballroom, several restaurants, museums, and beautiful gardens, is nevertheless threatened by its perilous position on the rocky jetty. Because of its many disasters throughout the years, many people believe that the house is cursed. In fact, the Victorian Cliff House withstood the 1906 San Francisco earthquake but was destroyed a year later. It has been damaged twice since then and rebuilt. Number 8. Drer River House, Serbia. The Drer River House is a tiny brick home tucked away in rural Serbia and has the name of River House, so you would think it was on prime waterfront property. Yes and no, because the Drer River House is located on a little rock literally in the middle of the river. This hazardous home was constructed in 1968, yet it has been destroyed several times by floods. The homeowners cannot be blamed for wanting a little peace and quiet, but this property may be more work than it is worth, and if the tides ebb and flow of the river are poor during a storm, forget about it. The Drer River House was built by a group of local swimmers who wanted to get some shelter when the conditions of the river got a little too rough, but in the end, they built a structure that is now just as susceptible to nature as they were today. The Drer River House is more interesting as a fun tourist attraction than as a livable home, and if you do want to live there, you shall need to learn how to swim, because how else would you visit the supermarket? Number 7. Free Spirit Spheres. The most beautiful things are frequently the most dangerous, and that principle applies equally to homes as it does to trees. The entertaining and unique Free Spirit tree houses offer something a little more otherworldly without having to leave the atmosphere of the planet, but there is a cost. One wrong move and you are done. These tiny minimal spherical tree houses are simply one room with access via an outdoor spiral staircase that wraps around a tree trunk and leads to a small personal suspension bridge. If you have ever climbed up a tree as part of a camp, This free-spirited tree house may seem quite familiar. The hike can get pretty high up there, so if you are coming home after a long day at the job or late night out and make one little mistake and you are looking at a fractured ankle or leg, the inhabitants of the pods live in an environmentally friendly house that was designed to look like a tree. The small balls are constructed of local materials like spruce and fiberglass, and many of the interiors are adorned with indigenous paintings, allowing people living inside to reconnect with nature while also receiving a little history lesson. As long as they remember not to look down at living minimally can be fun, but all it takes is for a few wires to break or some old trees to get too creaky, and the sphere is done for good. Also, do not forget about the chance of a forest fire. The only folks suited to live high up in the trees are animals and elves. Number 6. Lichenstein Castle. Castles are supposed to be the safest place in the realm, with strong walls, crocodiles, moats full of alligators and archers, and towers prepared to rain down arrows on attackers. What could go wrong when you consider that walls of Lichenstein Castle in Germany? Perhaps ask the walls of Lichenstein Castle in Germany about it, because I am sure they had got a tale to tell from a distance. Lichenstein Castle is not quite well known outside of Germany, but it is recognized in Baden-Württemberg as the fairy tale castle. The castle is actually a hunting lodge constructed on the foundations of a former castle, and the current structure was completed in 1842. The castle can be found on a narrow, steep hillside and has an interesting history. It was constructed in the form of a pseudo-medieval design that was rather haphazard. The most prominent feature of the property is that the castle's outer wall is built directly on the verge of a cliff, giving it an insane perspective. According to architects, the castle is structurally sound, but any shift in foundation might cause it to collapse. During World War II, an American tank passing through the valley below lobbed a shell that hit the main tower dead-on, fortunately failing to detonate. However, a dent in the plaster where the projectile struck remains to this day. Number 5. Takasushi in Japan. The Japanese have a penchant for out-of-this-world teardrop architecture, and this fantastic Takasushi Tea House was no exception, designed by Iro Fujimori. The tree-bound tea house sits precariously atop 2 trees on a piece of family property in Nagano Prefecture, Japan. Tea experts have always had complete control over the building of their tea houses, with simplicity being their main concern. Architects or craftsmen were avoided by tea masters to assist them with the construction, which follows this practice. Fujimori Tea House is quite small and compact and can accommodate 4.5 tatami mats. Tommy Matz, the architect, describes the small building as though it were an extension of body of someone, like a piece of clothing. However, main concern of him is not necessarily the art of tea making, but pushing the limits and constraints of a traditional tea house. Chestnut trees were felled on a nearby mountain and brought to the site, where they were used as the supports for the structure. The only means of lighting up Takasushi unlit early is to have a tea house that is too tall, forcing guests to scale a freestanding ladder leaning against one of the trees. In order to get to the tiny house near the top of the ladder, visitors must remove their shoes and leave them on the platform. Despite concerns about the safety of this precarious, Perch authorities have permitted it to continue its millennia-old custom of providing tea. Number 4. Hanging Temple, China. The series of hanging monasteries usually elicits a gasp from tourists perched at incredible heights. The structure was constructed in 491 AD and have withstood the passage of time, clung to a crag of Hengshan Mountain, seemingly defying gravity. The temple has 40 rooms connected by an intriguing labyrinth of passageways. The temple is dedicated to 3 religions: Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. All of these are represented in 78 statues and carvings throughout the temple, as well as in 3 separate temples built within its walls. How can a structure like this endure the winds and storms of so many years? The extraordinary hanging monastery is an architectural marvel, with a unique mechanical concept employed to create the framework. Cross beams were half inserted into the rock at the foundation, while the rocking back provided its support. Why build a monastery on a cliff in this manner? The reason is that the builders followed a principle and Taoism-known noises, including those from rooster crowing and dog baying, so from the upper ground all noises cease. How they constructed so much of it by hand all those years ago without succumbing to their fate is enough to make your head spin. It was built on a ledge high above the valley floor, where fierce winds and storms cannot help but suggest that this is one of the most dangerous houses of the world. Number 3. Sudiagin, Russia. The Sudiagin's notorious mansion is a 13th-floor building constructed over the course of 12 years by a notorious mobster and his family, towering above the city of Arkhangelsk in far north of Russia. It is thought to be the tallest wooden house of the world, reaching to a height of 144 feet. Sufyan began construction in 1992, but he was inspired by Japanese vernacular architecture and timber homes. When he started in Norway, one of his goals was to keep going further. He added 3 stories, but the house then looked ungainly like a mushroom. So he added another, and it still did not look right. Therefore, he kept going. What you see now is a delightful accident, unlike many of the other homes on our countdown. The oaken house was not constructed with regard for safety rules. It is a visible fire danger, and the remaining portion is a little 2-story wooden house roughly the same size as what was planned to be erected before ambitions of the Sudiagin of a wooden tower took hold. These constructions were completely destroyed in a fire in 2012. The wood skyscraper house was built without any of the necessary permits, making it an illegal structure, as well as a massive fire hazard, which is why it was condemned in 2008, so Sudiagin even spent some time in prison. Number 2. Catskill Pillar, Georgia. There are many strange and frightening structures that we have witnessed today. However, the house on Catskill Pillar in Georgia surpasses them all, as the name implies. This hazardous home is located at the pinnacle of a 130-foot pillar. The Catskill Pillar was so isolated that if you resided there, you died there. During medieval times, the structure was a church where monks sought only to be away from it all, but eventually, the Catskill Pillar became so remote and disconnected from the rest of the world below that if you lived there, you also perished there. The church was built on top of a hill, which was not only difficult to reach, but also inconvenient for the populace. As an alternative, there was simply nowhere else to go, and getting up and down proved to be too challenging, so it seemed more pious and resolute if you reached the top alone rather than coming back down after the last monk died. The Catskill Pillar remained abandoned until 1995, when one local monk returned to the sacred site to restore it to its former grandeur and, of course, settled there. The only way for the monk to reach the top was by climbing a centuries-old iron ladder that is so hazardous that the local government has been advised not to use it, since if you fall you might be impaled on one of its spikes. Number 1. Castle Fallet de la Roca. A town in Basque Country of Spain resembles a place that was once normal in shape and by some unknown force has been stretched out over kilometer-long basalt formation. Settlements are pushed perilously close to the edge of a 160-foot drop-off, while the wind blows along the cliff above the countryside and rivers that flank it. The town's narrow streets still reflect its medieval origins, and the city center features ramparts that protected the settlement. During the Civil War, many residences and streets are constructed on top of the dark volcanic rock that serves as a pedestal for the city. The major street of Castle Fallet Heap winds its way through the entire town, narrowly sandwiched between homes on both sides, attempting to maintain its grip on the cliff face created by 2 overlapping lava flows. The houses are frightening because of their dangerous placement and their great age. Many people think that even a minor earthquake would cause widespread damage. From its height in the layered volcanic formation, they are still inhabited and serve as a major tourist attraction near Valencia, Spain. The town has magnificent views to enhance the drama of the scenery, which are lit from sunset until midnight for 6 months out of the year.